So the message is when finances shake the house. So when there's financial trouble in the house, basically we're going to try to learn how to deal with it. We're going to kind of come at it from maybe a different angle today. A lot of people state that Jesus spoke more about money than anything else. It's not quite true, but it's probably his fourth most common topic that he spoke on. The kingdom of heaven was number one, God the Father number two, faith number three, and then money. So he talks more about money than he talks about sin and Satan. So that's means it's quite important. Almost 1/3 of all the parables that Jesus talks about are about money. Because of some of the implications of money, people do one of two things in the church. We either ignore it entirely or we overemphasize it in one way or another. And we're going to try not to do that today. We're going to try to just look at it hopefully in a very practical way, but a very biblical way as well. When I was first asked to do this topic, financially we're doing okay right now, and it worried me a little bit if that affects what I'm going to say. And then I realized that we haven't always done okay. We've done very badly in life at times financially. So we've been that verse that Paul says in Philippians 4. I know what it's like to be in need, and I know what it's like to have plenty. I've felt that. When we were kids, we grew up in a generationally poor family, a family that was poor. Not only our family was poor, my parents' family was poor, my grandparents' family was poor, and you can probably go further back than that. Some of them shockingly poor. I remember my best poor story, I think, was when I was in grade 3. I went to school in grade 3 into the public schools because you didn't have to pay for public school. And my shoes, I had an issue. If you look, my sleeves are rolled up today. That comes from being a kid, that your sleeves are always too short. So I don't know if it was because my feet were too big for my shoes or what it was, but my shoes had come apart in the front. And eventually in grade 3, my shoes had come to the place where they were only attached at the heels in my one pair of shoes. And so we took elastic bands and wrapped them around the shoe to keep the shoe from flapping when you walked. And it was noticed by the vice principal of our school, and I was called into the vice principal's office. Now, as a young kid, I'd never been in trouble at all, so I was a little bit concerned about that. And he and the teacher drove me off the school grounds and took me to Goodwill. In America, Goodwill is where you take all your stuff you're not going to use anymore and you donate it, and it gets repaired and sold for secondhand clothes, all kinds of things. So he took me there, and he bought me a pair of shoes, secondhand shoes, but I was absolutely thrilled. And they normally would take your stuff and repair it and sell it again. I remember distinctly the lady taking my shoes, pulling off all the rubber bands, keeping the rubber bands, throwing my shoes in the trash. So that's where we were when we were little. Even after we've gotten married, when we first moved to Bulawayo, we came from a pastor's job, and we came to Bulawayo with no money. Come in the hyperinflation time when everybody was battling to some extent. And I remember a pastor from a church we didn't go to gave us a box of this rice and soy packets that were donated around the place. And so that's what we had for dinner that night. And we cooked it up and we had it. And beggars can't be choosers, but man, we felt it was awful. We hated the stuff. And it was like, so the next night we had it again and we added stuff to it. And it was just, we really were battling to make it like really work for us. And so then from that point on, we take the soy and separate it and let the dogs have the soy and keep the rice and just have the rice. So we've gone through tough times. We've gone through good times. We've gone through tough times. And the thing that it says to me is that sometimes these things go in cycles. And it's not always about what we're doing or who we are. There's times when some of these things can just happen. I just want to start, we're talking a little bit about that being poor. But I want to say that it's not a sin to be poor. It's not a sin to be rich either. But there's a lot of times that sin can make you poor as well. We're going to talk about that today. Poverty and wealth can often reveal who you really are. So a lot of times it's not really about the actual amount of money that you've got. And so I'm looking at more when finances shake your house, more when you're shaking your own house because of how you're dealing with finances, more than the amount of money you've got. Okay. Here we go. The hardest, as they say, the hardest parable in the Bible. Luke chapter 16. Bibles don't even know what to call this. We'll call it something. And you might notice something else. Like we all know about the lost sheep and the lost coin and the prodigal son. This one, my Bible calls this the parable of the shrewd manager. Some people call it the shrewd steward, the dishonest steward, the embezzling steward. I mean, there's all kinds of names. But that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, I'm just going to read it. I'm just going to read it first. Jesus told his disciples there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account for your management, because you cannot be manager any longer." The manager said to himself, "What should I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do. So that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their homes." So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" 800 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. He asked the second one, "How much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill, make it 100. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly, which is the most confusing part of this whole thing. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whomever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? If you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No servant can serve two masters. Either will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. If you remember that verse in the King James, you remember the word for money there? Mammon, a word that we never use anywhere except in the church. I mean, we don't even know what that means hardly anymore. Mammon. Okay, so when you go through this, I've listened to, my wife heard me listen to probably 20 sermons yesterday, just hearing people's takes on this sermon. And most of them have said that the shrewd manager sat down, ripped off his boss, made himself a place in the future, and he was commended for being shrewd. And it just doesn't really sound right to me. I don't know about you, but this doesn't sound right to me. When I think back to the parables of the talents, the guy who had 5 went and made 10, the guy who had 2 went and made 4, and the guy who had 1 buried it and then gave the 1 back to the master, and he was kicked out into basically hell for giving back what he'd already had been given. He gave it back 100%. And so I have a hard time seeing Jesus saying that the rich master is going to be happy that the guy ripped him off. So I had an issue with that. One guy came up with a possible solution, which when I studied it historically, made sense to me as well. This guy, he's a steward. So when you were rich, you had somebody who took care of all your economy of your house. The word for steward actually is the exact same word we now use for economy. Ecos is for house, and nomenos is for management or for the rules. So basically your economy is the rules of your house, or the way that you manage the money of your house. So back in those days, some stewards were given a salary. Other stewards were actually given possessions. So they were given the oil, they were given the wheat from the property, and they would go out and loan them out or sell them. And whatever they made on top of the master's money was now their money to collect. We see that with the tax collectors of the time. They did the same thing. they would often be set the taxes, but whatever they could get on top of that, they could put in their pocket. Remember the story of Nicodemus, and he said, all these guys that have taken too much money, I'm going to pay them back. It's the same thing. So I believe what he's actually doing there is he realized that he's got a problem, he's going to be fired. So what he does is he calls the guys in, and he basically takes off his commission. So he hasn't stolen from the master, he's just taken off what he was charging. Maybe that's part of the dishonesty at the beginning, because some of the things that he's added 100% onto, some of them he's added 20% onto. You can see there's no rhyme or reason to how he's doing it. And maybe that's part of the mismanagement. But so he's decided that I can't get that money because I'm not going to have a job, I'm not going to be able to collect it. So instead of getting the cash, which I can't get at this stage, let me forgive my portion of the debt and make these people happy. And then wherever I go, these guys are going to welcome me in. I think that's a pretty good explanation to what happened there. But the point of the message really is about the money. Is how do you treat the money? What is money to you? And that's what I want us to look at today. I signed this up last night. It was very tough because to me it looked a lot like when I'm thinking Joseph's silver cup. So we've got this silver cup here. And we've got, do you know what this is? Anybody? You don't know what this is? What is that? A Leatherman, or it's not a proper Leatherman, but it's a multi-tool. So there's dozens and dozens of tools in this one thing here. So this goes with me everywhere I go. If I need a knife, a screwdriver, a pair of pliers, or whatever, I've got my multi-tool. So in life, you can treat money as a treasure. You can treat it as something like in the mythology of the dragons sitting on piles and piles of gold and hoarding as much as they can for themselves. All they do is become a target because they've got all this gold that they're not doing anything with, just hoarding it. Or your money can be a tool. It can be a thing that's useful, something that you use when you need it, something you use to help yourself, to help other people. And there's a different mindset in the two. If you feel like it's a treasure, something that you have to hang on to no matter what, you're missing out on on the benefits of what it can be. But if you realize it's just a tool, and how you use that tool is how you'll be judged. Okay, if you just hoard it, you're gonna be like the guy who took the one and just buried it, and that wasn't good for him. We're gonna sort of come back to this chapter a little bit, but how are you using your money? Are you using it like it's a tool, or are you using it like it's a treasure? Are you using it for the benefit of people around you, or are you just trying to hang on to every bit that you can? And the attitude you have towards money will affect everything that you do in life. Okay, so let's go to number 2. How do finances shake the home? Well, first of all, you've got things like generational poverty. Now, in my belief system is I don't believe necessarily in like a generational curse story. Some people do, that's okay. But I believe what happens is that poor people teach their kids how to be poor people. And rich people tend to teach their kids how to be rich people a lot of times. And a lot of times, if we keep doing the same things our parents have done, we're going to end up in the same place that they are. Our family, some of our issues with poverty was based in divorce, things like that, broken families, and just nothing being passed from family from generation to generation. When my grandparents died, I didn't get anything from it, except for we had to go and clean the place that they had, and they were hoarding. We as kids thought this is going to be amazing. We're going to get all this junk, but under the junk we're going to find money. They've been hiding money somewhere, and I can tell you the only thing we found when we lifted the one piece of junk was a huge possum. I don't even know if you know what that is. Like a giant white rat, and hissing at us, and we freaked out, and a hornet's nest. Those are the only 2 things we found in there. So nothing was passed from my grandparents to my mom. Nothing was passed from to my dad on his side. My dad passed a few years ago, and nothing was passed to us. I only found out that he'd passed because my mom had seen the obituary online weeks after he had been born. So nothing was passed to us. When my mom dies, there'll be trinkets, but there'll be nothing of any monetary value passed down to us. So in our life, we're trying to change that. We're trying to make it so that when something happens to us, we feel like our children will be taken care of. Because contrary to the African way, sometimes your kids aren't there to take care of you. You're supposed to be storing up for your children. And so I know for some people that might be like backwards thinking, but the Bible tells us that we're supposed to store up an inheritance for not only our children, but our children's children and their children. So for generations, we should be giving an inheritance. And we can only do that if we're doing good financial practices. Okay. So we're going to pass on healthy practices. And we're going to get into unhealthy ones just now. But there was a study done in America, and they discovered that if you did 4 things in your life, you had an over 90% chance of not remaining in poverty. Are you ready? What they are? Okay. Number 1, graduate from high school. How many of you thought that might be like get a college diploma? But this doesn't say that. Graduate from high school. Number 2, have a job. It doesn't say have a good job. It just says have a job. Number 3, don't have children outside of marriage. Okay? And number 4, marry after the age of 21. Don't rush into marriage straight away. People that hit all 4 of those things in their life, which is a very low bar, really, something like 90 to 95% chance they will not live a life of poverty. Not saying they won't have hard times from time to time, but 90% chance. And the more of those that you break, the higher your possibilities are to remain in poverty. Okay. Again, like I said, it's not a sin to be poor. It's not a sin to be rich. But sin can impoverish not only your soul, but your wallet as well. We've just seen, I don't know if you know, well, from my view on life right now, the most viral moment of the moment, do you know what it is? The CEO, his first name is Andy. We'll just say Andy. Andy was caught at a Coldplay concert, which might be bad enough for his own, I don't know, hugging onto a woman who wasn't his wife, and she was actually the HR manager of their company. So, that's a very un-HR thing to do. But anyway, and they got caught, and they were obviously caught. Look, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, okay? But his actions just screamed guilt. The way he ducked out of the camera and tried to hide him or whatever. He's worth maybe as much as $70 to $100 million. Well, he was a week ago. He's probably worth now half that, because the wife is getting half of that money in the upcoming divorce. So that's, I'm not even going to say an indiscretion. I'm going to say his sin is probably going to cost him something like $50 million for that sin. I mean, and that's a big one, okay? But our sin costs us even in small ways, but it can cost us on a regular basis. Let's look. 1 Timothy 6 obviously says, this is probably the most, so I've got the most difficult parable I started with. Now I'm going to go to the most misquoted verse in the Bible, I think. Does anybody know where we're going to go right now? The misquoted verse is, money is the root of all evil. The Bible doesn't say that. Let's read what it says. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. I like all evil better than all kinds of evil, but anyway, it's okay. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So they've stabbed themselves because they're chasing after money. So it's not money that's the problem. It's our attitude towards it. When we love it and treasure it, and it's our precious, you know what I mean? And that means you'll do everything you can to get it, and everything you can to hang on to it. regardless of who else it could hurt or whatever. And we're not looking at it as just simply a tool. A tool that's really, if you looked at it, loaned to us. It's not even our own tool. So here's some things in your house that can create how your finances can shape the house. And none of these, I'm not talking about amounts. I'm not talking about how much money you have. I'm talking about how you're dealing with the things in the house. Okay. Number one, unwise decisions. How many of us have ever made a decision that later on we thought, I remember I had made some money, my first time I'd ever made any amount of money, and I had $20,000. I had actually almost $30,000 just before we came to Zimbabwe. So 10,000 was going to move all my stuff and all of my family, plane tickets in the container, and I was going to have 20,000 when I got here to live on while we were figuring out what we were going to do. That was my plan. And a friend of mine said, I've got an investment, and give us 10 grand and you can make back 15 in about 6 months' time. And I'm like, wonderful. And my wife was like, this is a bad idea. And I'm like, no, this guy knows his money. We lost 10 grand. And so you sit there and think, sheesh, I would have really, in those days, you could live in Zimbabwe for a long time on 10 grand. So we had to sort of live with that unwise decision. And we make a lot of unwise decisions often. I'll come back to it, but often from greed, because we think let's make money faster than what we normally do. And they say that money and losing weight are kind of the same thing. If you do it too quickly, it's easy for the opposite to happen again. So who knows? We'll see. Another thing in marriages especially is unmet expectations. Maybe the wife thinks that the way that you wined her and dined her before you got married is what's going to happen every week while you were married. And, or, the jewelry you bought or the things that you did or the places you traveled to, maybe they thought that's what marriage is. We're going to have things for forever and ever like that. And it doesn't work like that, does it? And I discovered in my house that one of the things that was good was there was a time when we were short on money, not short on making money, but short on having money to spend. Not because of a bad decision, but I was just investing heavy. And so, and the things I was investing heavy with was making our pocket quite light. And so when I just said this, Shane, at the time, I said, look, we're investing this amount every month. I just don't really have the cash to do going out as much as we have or whatever. And when I explained it to her, it was fine. It was okay. And then when we got to the end of that investment, I remember the time she says, thank God we finally finished that one. And we can now sort of sit back and relax. And I'm like, I've already started another investment. But anyway, as long as those pan out, as guys, we get good credit for that. But the thing is, if we're so often as men, we might just not be saying what's going on. And so all our wife can do is go by past experience. And so if things are better than they were and we don't say anything, or things are worse than they were and we don't say anything, then it creates tension. Because why? There's no communication. And if there's no communication, what comes in? Come on. This is not a hard one. What comes in if you don't have communication? Conflict. Okay, I was going to say, you said mistrust. I was going to say distrust, same thing. But distrust. As soon as you don't believe in each other, now all of a sudden, he's just hanging on to money because he doesn't want me to spend it on this, or whatever. It becomes one against the other, instead of us as a team working together. And I just found for me, when I would say to Shreen, this is a bit of a tight time, or we're trying to do something, it's going to take us a little while to get through this, it was fine. When we were paying off our house, I said to Shreen, this year, let's just buckle down. Let's not do anything extra. Let's not go on any trips. Let's just really, really just buckle down, put this money together, and clear the house, which we did. And do you have any issues with that? No. So a lot of times we're not communicating, so then the other person doesn't know what's going on. And all we're doing is creating issues. I remembered, I forgot to tell you something that I looked up just before we started. They say as many as 1/3 of all divorces are ending because of financial issues. And they're saying as many as 54% of all divorces cite major debt as an issue in the divorce, major debt. And, so we've got these unmet expectations. Greed comes in. We start looking for fast money. And you know what the problem is with fast money? All it does is disappear fast most of the time. It doesn't normally come back fast. But the problem is even if it works the first time, the next time we invest twice as much, and it eventually just goes. It doesn't. That's kind of that fool and his money are soon parted sort of story, isn't it? Fast money is not a good way to go. And what I've seen with guys, and I've made this a cricket analogy for Zimbabweans, so it's a bit easier. I've seen guys get in trouble for finances, right? And so now, instead of just saying, okay, how can I work this out? When the guy first goes up to play cricket, and he gets into the crease, he's got his bat, he's lined in where things are, the guy starts bowling. What do most good batsmen do for the first 4 or 5 balls? Just block. Okay? The problem is when you've made a financial mistake, you generally are trying to go for sixes every time. So what happens? If you go for a six at first, you're going to be out for what they call a golden duck, isn't it? I've hit everything right, hey, haven't I? Are you impressed? Anyway, and I say to guys, you know what? You've had a financial issue. You've created your own problem most of the time. That's okay. Just block. Just do your normal job. Just figure out, can I do a little bit more? Hit for singles, hit for doubles, work with your partner, get a team. Now I forgot what that's called. What do you call it when you got your pair going? A partnership. Get your partnership moving, working together, and when you start doing that, 4s and 6s will come. But if you just think every single time, I've got this much debt, I need to get this flattened in one hit. All you're doing is trying for 6s, and 90% of the time you're putting yourself into a worse place. If you get a reputation that's going out for golden ducks all the time, you're going to be off the team just now. So, sometimes slow and steady is often a much better thing when it comes to building wealth. The other thing with greed, which you might not think of it as greed necessarily, but I think it is this phrase in America, I don't know what they say here for the same phrase, is keeping up with the Joneses. So I don't know who you're keeping up with in Zimbabwe. Maybe not the Joneses, but, so many people. With who? Chavayo. Okay. But you know what? So many times we do that with our vehicles, our clothes, our phones. Often when I preach to college guys or young guys, I say to them, if you didn't buy a phone every year, after a couple of years, you'd have enough money to buy a car. If you didn't buy a car every year, after a few years, you'd have enough money to buy a house. So there's a chance that if you forego the latest upgrades all the time, that you would you'd actually be putting money away for something that lasts, not a phone that the first time you drop it, you've got a cracked screen and you can be very sad. I upgraded my phone last year, or earlier this year, mostly because of my business. I blimmin' go through my memory like crazy. And so even my wife, we often sit on the weekends and deleting all the WhatsApp videos and everything mindless sense. We sit there and delete all of those things because we need the space. And so eventually I upgraded my phone because I found one that's got 1 terabyte of memory. So I'm really happy with that. So I'm not hit my limit at this stage. But I thought my phone before that, was an S7. So from a 7 to a 24, you can see I skipped a whole lot. I actually realized I had one phone in between the two, but my company is still using the 7 as well, and they're using the one that was in between. But we spend so much time trying to impress other people, and you know what? They're going to be one of two things. They're going to be jealous, or they're going to be completely unimpressed. So you spend a lot of effort trying to make other people happy, making yourself unhappy in the meantime. For what? To get approval from someone you don't even like most of the time. So both of those kind of the same thing. Unfortunately, in a lot of families, money disappears because of addictions, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex. It can be anything. There was a time in our life that we were having financial difficulties because I just got hooked on buying sports cards, because you could get these cards and you buy one pack of cards for $1 and you could find one that was worth a couple $100 or even more. And that gambling side of that just got me. And I was always buying cards and then sticking them in the drawer so my wife didn't see what I had spent all this money on. And it was a time when we weren't really doing well for money. But we can get hooked into all of these things: gambling, bad investments. Going back to investment story, I've got a family as a client of mine, and apparently the husband has gotten involved in these Ponzi schemes. And not only has he gotten involved, he's gotten everybody knows involved. And he's gone to a place now where he owes tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, because he thought he was going to make a bunch of money. And even the husband and wife are no longer talking to each other, could be on the verge of a divorce, because he thought he had a fast way to sort of get out of where they were and make some money. And we should remember those guys in prayer, because they're at a crossroads right now. And there's so much pressure on that family unit because of the chances he's taken, and he's tried to do it quickly. And, if it comes in quick, it's likely to go out quick as well. Hey? And then another thing in the house that creates problems. So all of these are problems created that finances are showing us, but it's not that, if you see, none of them have to do with the amount of money. It has to do with how we're handling it with each other as a partnership in the house. There's two sides: pride and shame. There's times in life where we as guys, we want to provide and we work hard and we do what we can. And there's times when it's just not enough. There's other times, some families, the husband and wife both work. There's some families where the wife makes more money than the husband. And sometimes guys have an issue with that. I would love to have that issue. I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem. If my wife or my kids start making a lot more money than me, I'll be very happy for that day. And we tend to hide reality. I remember back when we were young, first newly married, I was doing a sales job, full commission, all commission sales job. And it was hard. We had to do door to door. I don't know if you've ever sold door to door. I don't think there's a telemarketing. I've done that as well. It's also rough. But door to door with a guy, I can slam the door in your face and refuse you. And I had gotten to a place where I'd been turned down so many places, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I'd gone into depression. And I'd get up in the morning, I'd put on my tie and my outfit, whatever, and I'd go to the game arcade, and I'd just go spend $50 on the arcade playing games all day long for 8 hours, and then go back home at the end of the day like I'd been at work all day. And, I can tell you that perpetuated at that stage in my heart, just shame. I wasn't happy with that. And eventually I got a different job because this job just wasn't working. And, it was like one of the first times in my life that I'm trying to sell and I just can't sell. It was a very, very difficult time. But instead of just saying, look, this is really a hard time for me, it's not working. And if I just said that, I think it would have broken a lot of it. But as guys, we just think, no, we just must shoulder it. It doesn't matter. I know that there's guys I don't think talk about this hardly ever. I think there's times when guys, even being very, very successful, that you just think somehow this whole thing is like a trick. Somehow I've tricked everybody into thinking I can make this thing work, and it's just going to stop just now. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who go around feeling that some people call it imposter syndrome. They just feel like they're just imposters, but they go there every day. They do the job. They do what they can, and they just think that at any moment this whole thing could come crumbling. And when you know the responsibilities you've got all these kids, how many ever you end up having, that you got to get through school and you got to feed them, you got to clothe them, and they come home and their pants are too short and they need another uniform. What do you mean another uniform? I'm sure I just bought you uniforms. Or the school wants them to go on a tour and do this, or whatever those things are. And when you're struggling to make it, those things can become crushing. And if we, as a partnership, talk to each other that opens up something else, you know? And a lot of times you find that your wife comes in and says, you know what, you don't have to do all of these things. Or let me figure out a way to help, or whatever. Or just being a support. All of that's good things. But as guys, a lot of times we just think, let's just quietly bear this, and nobody realizes the burden that we're sitting under when we're doing that. And that is a breakdown in communication. That is sows seeds of mistrust because they don't know what's going on. And so, you know, anyway, that's heavy. Feels a bit heavy. Anyway, it's okay. So those are all things in your house that can create issues based around finances, but it's not actually the money itself. It all stems from how are you viewing your money? Are you viewing it as something that you have to gather at any cost, no matter what your integrity says, no matter what? Or is it a tool that you know that God has given you? Before we go further, let's just go back to that story for a minute. You know, the reason why so many people found this to be a hard story is it doesn't really feel like there's a good guy. You know what I mean? Prodigal son, you've got kind of a good guy and you've got a bad guy, a bad kid, but he repents and becomes a good guy. And those parables, we like those. Those are fine. We can work with those. But this one is like, what's he doing? I mean, you know, he doesn't seem like he's... But let's just go back a little bit and figure out some of these things. Who's the rich man? Who? The boss. But who is he in our story? Okay? God. Okay? And he's not... God very seldom in the parables is called a rich man. Most of the time he's the master or something else. So the rich man often... Anyway, it's less common. But let's say that's God. So the guy, he's the one managing what belongs to God. So that shrewd manager, the dishonest steward, who is he in the story? That's us. Okay, so that's maybe part of what's hard as well. That's us. So we're given this stuff to manage. None of it's ours, but we can use it to make something for ourselves. Okay, and if he had been using it wisely for the master and been making something for himself, that would have been okay. But if how I'm reading the story, he was like taking the master's money and putting double, 100% on top of it to make a lot more for himself and sort of ripping people off to do it, then he's not being a wise steward. He's abusing what he's been given. It goes down and it says, give an account for your management, because you cannot be a manager any longer. What does that mean in our life? When do we all have to give an account? I saw lips, I couldn't hear words. I didn't just repeat. That's when we die. When we die, we have to give an account for what we've done with what the Lord has given us. And it's not just money. It's talent, it's time, it's abilities, it's all of those things wrapped together. So, you know, are we going to be an unjust steward with what the Lord has given us? And are we going to abuse the people around us for our own gain? Then it goes a little bit further, and he says that, you know, he's now going to help other people with the money. And then the weird thing, when you go a bit further, it says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Is he now talking about the steward going into friends' houses? Because those are not eternal dwellings. He's talking about us in heaven. The things that, when we take that money, which in some ways is part of the world system, if we take that money and use it for people, and use it to help other people, then it helps gain us an eternal dwelling. It helps us gain a place in heaven, but not because of the works. But you know what I mean? It helps us to put things up towards heaven. And I don't want to say that part yet. I'll come back to that. And it says that if we're trustworthy, with little will be given much. We see that all the time in all the parables. So God gives you a little bit. If you're trustworthy, it means you deal fairly, you deal right with what you've been given, then you'll get more. But then it says another thing here. If you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, then who will give you property of your own? So he's saying that there's a way for you to store up things for yourself by using God's things well. Okay, we'll come back to that just now. Does that all make sense? If finances becomes you know what the amazing thing about a tool is? A tool can do anything, right? I tried to, it didn't work, but we discovered when my wife came back from India from brain surgery that she still had a staple in her head. And I said, let me get my multi-tool, I'll get it out. I can promise you it didn't work. She let me try a little bit, but you have to have a very special tool to make it work. And then we found she had 2 or 3 of them, not just the one. Anyway, so here you've got this is besides this tool here, this is probably my most used, my little serrated edge knife, which is still very, very sharp. Now, the thing about a tool is useful, used as a tool, but used incorrectly, it becomes a weapon. And so we can either use things for the benefit of those, or we can use them to hurt those around us, isn't it? So even money as a tool is valuable, but a tool can be misused as well. So we need to use money correctly. So the first thing we need to do when it comes to finances, we have to find contentment, no matter where we are. We have to be content where we are. I remember, what's it, Wordsworth, or whatever, the one about that poem, You'll Be a Man, My Son. Do you know that poem? You can put everything on the roll of the die, and win or lose, it's the same. I hate that poem. You know what I mean? I'm sitting there thinking, how can you put everything you've got on the roll, and if you lose, it's okay, and if you win, it's okay. Right? But, there's a little bit to that in Philippians 4, second half of 11, all the way to 13. I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content and in any and every situation, whether it's well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. We have to always remember that this tool that we're using is not our tool. It's not based on our own cleverness. It's given to us by God. And when we realize that he provides, he's the one who gives us, we then need to live in a place of contentment. Now, if God has given us and we're wasteful, or God's given us and we're foolish, or God's given us and we abuse the funds and they disappear, then we shouldn't cry about that. You know what I mean? But if he's given us these things and we're handling these things in a godly way, they can only be a blessing to people, including to our own selves. When it comes to money, the number one problem with money is that it's easy to get greedy. It's easy to feel greedy. I remember growing up, because we were in a poor family, my mom used to always tell us that rich people were rich because they did something wrong to somebody else. Like nobody could ever be rich just by the works of their hands. And I used to kind of think that was true. And then I started, as I was growing up, I started having jobs when I was about 8 years old. And I started thinking, you know what? It's nice to have some money. You know what I mean? So my mom would say, no, rich people, they're rich. Even like in the church, we had anyway, I'm going to that. But rich people, rich people are rich because they do this and they do that. And I used to think at one stage, but one day I want to be rich. So I don't think you have to be like that to be rich. You know what I mean? And I can remember just thinking, I'm thinking to myself, I don't think you're completely right on your perspective here. And even as a young child, I saw that, there were things that she was doing. And, like my mom tried really hard. She was divorced when I was my parents were separated when I was not even 1 year old. My brother was created later when they got together for a short time. And then they were only divorced when I was much older. But he wasn't around. And she then, when my shoe story happened, she was at university, going to university. And she was studying to get a degree in biochemical engineering. For a woman back in the 70s, And that was quite unusual. And had she finished that, the story would have been different. But she never finished. She went back another time or two and never finished. And all she did was created more debt for herself and for her family. And she never got to that completion. And so when we do things, we need to do them well. We need to do them to completion. I wonder how differently our life would be financially, or how different her life would be financially, if she had gotten her degree and been able to pay off those loans that she had gotten from. She's still paying off college loans in her 80s now. You know, it's not how it's meant to be. But we're going to find contentment. The contentment starts with not only trusting in God, but handling what He's given us well. You know, if He gives us something and we misuse it, we'll never find contentment in that. Does that make sense? So just because you're in need, if you created your need by your own fault, it's a much different place. You need to find forgiveness and repentance before you can find contentment. You know, people who believe they're in a place only because of bad luck, a lot of times it's not true. It can be. Things can happen to any of us, and tomorrow any of our situations can change. But what we need to do is we need to do something that helps create contentment, and that's helping other people. And so whatever we do, we need to be generous. We need to have generosity. Generosity is the basic thing that breaks greed. Breaks the hold of greed is when you're generous. You know, and it can be hard. For me, it was hard to be generous because we grew up having so little that you had to have everything you had in order to make it. So you felt like, I don't want to give anything to anybody. But my mom told me a story a couple of days ago on the phone, which I didn't even know. When I was young, one of my jobs was paper routes, and they had a contest with whoever got so many new subscriptions, you get a prize, or you get prizes. And I got a whack of prizes. I went out there and I had one of the biggest paper routes in the city, and I ended up having 2 or 3 paper routes at the end of the day. And one of the prizes I won was it's a type of candy. We call it in America. I think it's called bitter honey, and it's kind of like a honey. It's almost like a square sucker thing. I don't know if you have anything like that here. It's kind of like a smooth version of the inside of a crunchy, kind of. And they're normally like this long, and they've got a little lollipop stick, and they've got it's a little rectangle, and it's a honey flavored sort of thing. I got one. I won a giant one. The one I had a wooden stick that big around, and it went like this. And what we learned to do was you put it in the freezer, and when it got cold, you'd hit it with a hammer, and it would shatter into pieces, and then you could eat it a piece at a time. That was one of my prizes. Another prize that I got was a black and white television, back when all TVs were black and white. And I had that black and white TV for even in university, I still had that television. And so we worked hard. And my mom said to me the other day, she remembers when I was away somewhere, the parents had to do your paper route for you. And she says sometimes she couldn't understand why some days I do my paper route in 40 minutes or so, and some days it take me 3 or 4 hours to finish my paper route. And so the one day she did the paper route for me, and everywhere she went, the old lady would come out and say, "Oh, where's Jonathan? No, he's away on a trip. Oh, because he normally takes out my trash for me. Can you help?" And every house, I would sit with old people that just watch TV or whatever. I forgot about all that until my mom brought it up. And she was like, everywhere she went, they were saying, "But he always does this with us or for us." And so she understood why a 45-minute job sometimes took 5 hours. It wasn't about having the money to do stuff. It was just about putting it into people's lives. If we're not generous with our time, with our efforts, with our lives, with our money, we can never find contentment. It's impossible. The two go hand in hand. Everything that we do in our every way that we can let finances break apart our family is because we're not dealing in generosity and contentment. If we have those two things in all that we do, it doesn't really matter what we have. There was, have you ever seen the movie? I just thought it's the movie The Knight's Tale. Have you ever seen that movie? I love that movie. It was one of Heath Ledger's movies before he passed. And he found this woman, the chick of the movie, and she finds out that he's not really a knight, that he's just a povo that's been pretending to be a knight. And she's like, let's run away, because they now found out that he wasn't a knight and they were coming to arrest him. And she's like, let's run away. And he's like, where must we live? And she's like, we can live anywhere. And, as we live in a little house where we bring in the pigs in the winter so they don't freeze, and live with the pigs. And she says, what was his name? Can't remember his name. But she says, yes, whatever his name is, we'll live with the pigs, And when we're as a team in a partnership, we can live with the pigs if we have to live with the pigs. You know what I mean? And we'll be in a better place than Mr. Andy is this week and his $50 million that he's going to be left with. We can still be in a better place than that, So generosity breaks the hold of greed. And this is what I think goes back to what we were talking about just now. Proverbs 19:17. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to God, and he will reward him for what they have done. If you're kind to the poor, if you give to the poor, you're lending to God. I can't think of anybody else I'd rather lend my money to than to God. Can you imagine when you've got Zig and in the old days Zim dollars, you're loaning Zim dollars to God and he's giving you heavenly treasures. And if you look at that's in the story that we looked at, it says, take worldly wealth to gain friends, and when that is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. So you're storing up in heaven those things. So when you use the Master's resources well, you're storing up for yourself in heaven, which is eternal, and it doesn't fall away. I just quickly looked at a story in 2 Kings chapter 4. It's the story of the widow. Do you remember the widow with the oil? And there's two of them, but this is the one that it's just the oil, not the other one had oil and flour. And she goes to Elisha, please help, because my husband is dead. We've got debts, and they're coming to take my sons away and sell them into slavery. And he says, what do you have? And she says, I have a little bit of oil. And go borrow every pot you can borrow. And she borrows as many pots as she can find. And she starts pouring that oil, and it fills up every pot and doesn't stop pouring until all the pots are full. Now, what was she having to do? She was having to cover a debt, right? So she was in a financial problem because of a debt. Now, we don't know for sure who the widow is, but Jewish tradition tells us who they think the husband was. The husband was a guy called Obadiah, according to tradition, not according to the Bible, according to tradition. Obadiah meets Elijah years before, and he says, because he used to work for Ahab and Jezebel, he was their steward, and so he found out they were on the warpath against the prophets. So he took the prophets and he took 50 of them, hid them in a cave, and he took another 50 and hid them in another cave. And during this time, he kept them fed and watered. It appears from his own money. So he had a debt. His wife ended up with a debt that his kids were going to be sold into slavery for, which quite possibly could have been the debt that he incurred by taking care of God's prophets. And so when that happened, if that's how the story works, and we don't know for sure, but if it is, then that generosity was rewarded both in this world and in the next. And it wasn't just that my husband had a gambling debt, or my husband was with the prostitutes and ran up all this money, and then, God just sorted it out. It's not necessarily how that all works. But you know what? It does say that I'm not seeing the righteous forsaken. And so for me, I believe that if we do what we can to help those around us with what we've got, then what we've got becomes blessed. And it doesn't become blessed so that we can then be rich and do whatever the heck we want with the money. You know what I mean? It becomes blessed so that we can get more, that we can bless more people. and it can be a conduit that God uses through us to bless people. And what we do is we keep storing up those treasures in heaven. I think he does take care of us here as well, but it stores up as well. So I feel like we've gone through the toughest parable, and I think we maybe made some headway on it. Let's always remember our money is just a tool. It's not a treasure to hoard. It's just a tool. Remember that finances shaking the home often have very little to do with the amount of money we're talking about. It generally has to do with our communication, our partnership, the ways that we're mishandling or handling our money. That word I told you, economy, comes from the law of the home. Too many people get married and they don't have an understanding of what the law of that home should be. And one was raised that credit cards are fine, and if you want something, you just go and buy it. It doesn't matter. And other guys were raised differently. And your home needs to you need to figure out what are the rules of our house so that we can work together. Partnerships are always better than single people doing things on their own. So your house can be shaken with finances through generational poverty, unwise decisions, unmet expectations, greed, addictions, pride, and shame. But if we open up the door and shine the light on those things in our partnerships, in our homes, with our marriages, it creates a different thing. The cockroaches run, and what's left behind is something that God can work with. All right. Let's pray. I pray that out of his glorious riches, that he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide, long, high, and deep is the love of Christ, and to know that this love surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or even imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus, through all generations, forever and ever. Amen.